8.3, our student representative report. Renell, what's going on at the high school?
On November 21st, VHS along with 9 other schools performed the Young Americans in the Lama Theater, and each school received $250 for the performing arts programs, and VHS was the only one to receive an additional $1,000. We were selected due to our passion and dedication to the arts and for working hard to build an effective music education program. The UCLA field trip on December 2nd went very well. While on tour, students encountered Lisa Khan, last year's valedictorian from Vasquez, who shared her experiences at UCLA with the students. Also, Justin's has begun selling cap and gowns as well as class rings for the high school students. 56 students took the AADUSD test. This was a larger amount of students than previous years, and it's essentially almost running through the school. Boys and girls basketball and soccer have also started. On Tuesday, the school counselors held a lunch session and guided students interested in applying to Antelope Valley College with their applications. Tuesday night, the herd had a Veterans Holiday performance in Meadowlark, which had a good turnout. Yesterday, the school counselors held a PSAT presentation during lunch, in which they explained to the freshmen and sophomores the advantages of taking a practice SAT. Teachers have also begun recommending students to take AP exams, and a bigger turnout is expected since it seems that more students feel comfortable taking AP level classes. This week, AADUSD organized Winter Spirit Days related to the holiday season. Students dressed up in sweaters and Christmas hats, and each class competed in various lunchtime activities throughout the week.
Thank you, Dale. Uh, 8.4, a college AP presentation by Principal Devoe.
All right, I'll make this quick. A couple of weeks ago, we got a letter, the district got a letter from the college board letting us know that for the first time in district history, we've made the college board honor roll. It is a program that's in its 5th year. What this means, first of all, the College Board is the group responsible for advanced placement courses. They manage courses. If you want to offer an AP course on your campus, you have to submit the course to them. It's approved through them. It's also the agency that works closely with ETS for testing, SAT, PSAT. They garner a lot of respect internationally, particularly for the AP program. What the honor roll means is that over the last 3 years, so measuring from 2012 to 2014, that we had significant growth, not just in the enrollment in AP classes, but in the type of students we enrolled in those AP classes, meaning that we had a broader, more heterogeneous spectrum of kids that took the courses. And in addition to that, we had more percentages of students scoring 3 or higher. So we've expanded AP offerings, and we've increased the amount of students passing. You have to do both of those in order to qualify. I was curious how much this meant. So I did a little bit of research before tonight, and I looked up, okay, well, how many of the 547 school districts in the US and Canada, how many are in California that won this? 15. Okay. How many of the 15, how many are there? How many high school districts are there? So first you look up and it shows about 1187 total districts, but you got to eliminate elementary. So then I looked up unified, which would have at least 1, plus secondary high school districts, and that adds up to 418. And then you do the math, and it ends up being only 8% of the districts in the state that have a high school receive the honor roll. Puts us in the top 8% for our AP program performance. So I just wrote a quick press release. It has a quote that was in the original letter from Trevor Packer, the College Board Senior Vice President of AP Instruction. I provided that to the press. I added a quote at the end from myself, and Dr. Woodard asked me to share that with you. If I had to, the inside part of it is, well, what have you done, Ty, over the last 3 years for this to happen? And I would just tell you that we've made a concerted effort, the leadership team, from the very beginning when I came in 2012, we made a concerted effort to look at AP programs, to look at the kind of students that were going in, to identify kids that had potential but weren't challenging themselves, reach out proactively to those kids, and invite them to take that chance and take those classes. So I think a lot of credit goes out to the AP teachers, all the teachers, and AP in particular, for promoting. I think there's some credit that has to go to Annalie Ortiz our counselor for identifying students and reaching out to those students during registration and promoting the classes. I think our registration system, which is a lot more transparent than it was in previous years, it helps. And then I also have to give credit to Dr. Woodard, who when he came here in 2009, began the process of creating an academic foundation at the high school, transitioning it away from maybe a little bit more of the rural historical pieces that were there. So I think all of these things together got us to this point. It's a good honor, obviously good PR for the school, and I'm happy that I was around to see this come to fruition. So.
What I think for us too, it demonstrates a cultural shift. I think it's significant to talk about that, and why I've asked him to present that. I think obviously, fantastic administration, but again, primarily those teachers at the school that are teaching AP, and they've really taken it to heart. And we've got some great staff members that are just, working this thing. And I think that's a transition that you kind of mentioned as well, away from high school diploma and a lower level academic approach. We have more students every year attempting AP classes, not only attempting them, obviously passing in those areas. And I think that's significant. It's a major cultural academic shift at the high school. I mean, again, reflect back on the board. Thank you for supporting the fact that we had to overstaff the school in order to achieve that.
Yeah.
It was categorical. We programmed it. I think Mark's used that word quite a few times in terms of what we were doing. We consciously made these things aware that we were going to overstaff it. This is the result you're going to get in time. It didn't happen overnight. This is a 5-6 year process, but you can start to see through the fruition of some of the programs that we're talking about, the academic shift is happening. The kids are there and expect to be taught on a much higher level, and our teachers are responding. So again, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for the report and the presentation. But again, that's just the beginning. No pressure.
Yeah, I know. This is the expectation.
And before you step away, could you elaborate on what Ronell was telling us with regard to the performing arts team?
Sure.
That's it sounds like two wonderful feathers in our cap in one night. So.
Yeah. Well, there's the herd. It hasn't been a secret that the herd's been expanding its opportunities to perform publicly, and we've made a conscious effort to try to reach out and make them part of the community and not just a part of the high school. So last Friday, they went and visited Meadowlark and High Desert for 2 hours each, did caroling, Christmas caroling, which we arranged. And we actually took a little bit of arranging because they had to miss some classes for it, but we were able to make that happen. On Monday, they went to a veterans home, Pete Night out in Antelope Valley, and which they've done, this is the 3rd year in a row they've done that. They sang for the veterans. And then on Tuesday night, they had their winter concert. Is that what you were asking, Mike?
Well, no, specifically, could you refresh me? You said something about $250 for each school, and then that's this.
Oh, Young Americans Reward? Yeah, we participated in a program. This is all from Miss Cesari. She was part of a program growing up called Young Americans. It's a national program that celebrates the performing arts and supports performing artists. It's not just voice, but theater as well, drama. And if you remember, the board actually approved this. We sent some students on a field trip to see the Young Americans and be part of that in the spring, just this past spring. So it went very well. A lot of students were affected. Over summer, we arranged a more formal relationship with them, and we had 2 practice performances after school, and then a concert night in which they went down and we won. Right, we won an award, inspirational award that night. That included as part of it some supplemental income to the school that would go directly into the vocal program to help support her.
So do thank the AP teachers, yourself, with regard to the AP letter we just got tonight, and Ms. Cesari too. I mean, this is what we like to hear. We often get distracted with so much other stuff, and yet good things are happening throughout the district, and people are working hard. It makes me very proud.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Devoe, I heard your outgoing message also. I think that was very nice to send it out. And also, the nice stuff you said about the holiday season and all that. I think the kids here and the parents and all that, it's valuable. Thanks for sending it out.
You're welcome.
I heard it.
Thank you. Ed.
First of all, congratulations to you and your entire staff for bringing this thing forward. This is not an isolated issue. The high school has slowly been making progress in a number of areas. This is just indicative of one of those areas. And I think it's important to take the opportunity to highlight and show connectivity, because from some, we get under the gun about financing and trying to create budget capacity and trying to program and network, be it with charter schools or what have you. And yet, in a small school district, the special challenge is, and it's always, the secondary education, it's always the high school. Because you cannot program children into 30 to 1 classes and expect to be able to hold the kind of programs that you need. You're going to have 1 to 17, you're going to have 1 to 15. That's a budget breaker if we try and staff it the way we normally would staff classes to break even. And we could not have an AP program that is expanding. We could not have an AP program that allows kids who would otherwise not expose themselves to AP courses to do so. We could not have these kinds of awards if, as a district, we weren't willing to take hits in certain areas. And when you take hits in certain areas, it's programmed. You know that a certain class is going to lose money if it's a 1 to 15 proposition. So somewhere there has to be capacity in the budget to balance that out, to overcome that. And it's why we can't run elementary schools at a $500,000 loss every year and be able to do what we're doing at the high school. If we're going to be operating at a loss, such as the high school, there has to be a programmed effort to do so in order to provide a service. So, and yet, when we were in negative certification and LACO was looking at us, LACO's singular biggest advice to us was cut program, cut program, cut program, cut teachers and cut program. And that would mean cutting AP courses.
Yep.
That would be cutting this series work. It would mean doing all of the things that we are actually progressing in and getting awarded for. And I don't always know that in the heat of the argument we show connectivity. As you said, Mike, we get distracted because we're in the fight. But the fight is this. The fight is this. There's a reason for the fight. So when it's argued that, oh, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, sometimes I think we lose sight of the forest for the trees. And so I just think it's important to fold it in as to why we're doing what we're doing. And to understand that we're doing it and that we have enough flexibility and forethought to realize that some programs we don't break even. Some programs cost money. All programs cost money. So when people talk about money, oh, all they're focused on is money. Everything revolves around money. What doesn't revolve around money? So again, it's important to focus inward on these sorts of things. So I just wanted an opportunity to make that connection, that these are the sorts of things that we seek and we desire. And there would only be a valid argument contrary to all of this if we weren't actually succeeding. But the empirical data continues to show that we are. Do we have room for tremendous amounts of improvement? Absolutely. Are we doing some fairly decent things as a small school district? Absolutely. And so for me, it's a reaffirmation of the effort and the hassle that we're going through. Is it generating a positive outcome for students? And this is an example of yes, it is. So again, thank you for bringing it forward and sharing it with us. so that we can keep things in perspective as to what the fight's all about.
A couple of things, and obviously, we fully expect and look forward to this school as continuing that and providing additional labs and space, and it's going to be a tremendous resource to these teachers and students that attend that school every day. And so you can start to see what's going on over there. They're been hampered by the rain. It's a muddy mess over there. You know,
Did they go backwards at all, or just get slowed down?
you can, but we're not again.
No, I mean, go backwards, did the trenches fill in with mud, I mean, like cave-ins?
Did we lose ground?
No.
Or just slowed down?
Yeah, we're just, they can't, pour concrete. You saw they had tarps over the one, and we're trying to save what they have. And obviously, I love the fact our inspector is doing a phenomenal job. He's making sure, all the compaction tests, everything is all, we have Earth Systems, we have our folks at DSA, so we hired a good crew.
But no major setbacks as
So
well?
the only setback, if you want to call it, is there was some rain damage to some of the units that are currently sitting there. But we're assessing that, and that's on JTS to fix. They will fix as per spec and per our inspector, and it will be as they were new. So,
How's our community coffee?
well, it's filling up.
Is it filling up?
Absolutely, but it's also, I think it's obviously well designed and
Are we talking just about drywall kind of things?
it's really hard because you can't really get in it. They're all sealed up, but we can tell, like say under the soffit, some of there was some stucco damage underneath some of them, on the edges where, so they're going to repair it. They fully acknowledge it's their responsibility.
When you take and put together pieces like that, you have to go do some of that anyway, don't
Of
you?
course, you're correct.
Bring it together.
But they've acknowledged they're not skirting their duties. I got to say, JTS has been phenomenal to work with. They're professional, they're courteous, there's not a bunch of arguments, we have some pretty heated, spirited conversations, but it's not disrespectful. And those guys have, really done a great job at responding to our concerns, such as what I just brought up. We've taken pictures, we've documented everything. We're making sure, our guys are all over it. So that's our only current setback. Everything else is on task. And in fact, ahead of time, because I can't set all those buildings. We got all those buildings queued up, we're running out of space.
I'm curious, when does the first building go on the foundation? To make room for more buildings to show?
Well, as soon as the concrete tests and all that
Is
stuff,
that weeks?
I don't remember honestly.
Okay, thanks.
It was exciting to drive by though, and see all the new units
Yeah,
sitting there waiting.
definitely. They're all queuing up and we're kind of behind. So I think that they were anticipated setting them very soon. The problem is they can't yet because of all the mud. If it gets drained in there, it's going to be a trouble. So
They are beautiful inside, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
that crane that they use to set them on there is quite large. So we got to get a picture it doesn't fall in the mud. So,
Every single project.
yeah.
Because almost everything takes longer than full gear, so
You're right.
you're gonna hit it at some point.
We've got to be better here in Southern California than all the other
Well,
states.
we are, but unfortunately, the last week and a half, 2 weeks, we've been getting hammered.
I mean, you wonder how places like in England or
Yeah,
Seattle,
how do you ever get it done?
how do they pour concrete or paint things?
Boy, I don't know. And lastly, I wanted to report that we did have a bond oversight committee meeting. We got our quorum. And, very soon, we talked about Bob Lusky will be coming forward with a report. Possibly either Bob or Kim, I'm not sure yet, Kim Clemens. Obviously, the secretary is Lillian. And so we went back through that process. We have a few things we're going to bring to you. We reviewed all the expenditures to date, going back from the beginning. Every dollar was discussed and offered to each of the committee members to come down and look at details if they want with Steve, and we'll break out the file and they can look at whether it's legal or whether it's whatever those are. We're evaluating every dime. And so we had a good discussion and they got up to date. We are, honestly, I think we'll be like 3 more times for the end of the year. They asked to elevate the frequency, if you will, of the meetings just because we are expending large sums of money. And so we're going to do that. We're going to meet 3 more times. And in that process, we hope that they're going to put together a report that they'll bring to you, which is required under the law, and make sure that we're in compliance with that. So we're well on the way. It all looks good. Everything, as far as organizationally, we've got our committee together. They actually all showed up. We had a quorum, had a very good meeting. So good progress there.
And so we're ensuring that before progress payment is made, that they've done exactly what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely,
Down
yes.
the letter.
To the letter of the contract, yes.
I mean, I've been involved on the receiving and giving end of those things. And sometimes there's some negotiation that has to happen.
There is, and even so, we're keeping the retention and we're making sure that, we're holding them accountable, and those were the spirited
But you're not
conversations
having
come in.
to push hard on interpretation.
No,
milestones.
no, and that's where I come back and say they've been very agreeable to our concerns, and they understand when we withhold payment until they meet that deadline. Yeah.
I'll report out on my trip to San Francisco for the CSBA convention. It's a little different this time than it's ever been. Usually it starts on Thursdays, and then they have Wednesdays for the experienced board members, President's Day, and the legal symposium, and the new board members. And then this time, though, the first day was on a Saturday, and the regular convention started on Sunday instead of starting on a Thursday. And of course, and then I flew up, so I did get to battle the weather a little bit. The first day I was there, I attended the legal symposium. The following days, the thrusts on the classes I sat in on and the table talks. One was charter schools, school district oversight, and a very interesting one called When Charter Authorizers Collide, recognizing and avoiding conflicts on charter school members. I won't read the whole description, but needless to say, we are famous in that area, and many of the lawyers and superintendents know of us.
I'm sure when there's a whole presentation just on us.
Well, that's, I think
There
we
will
had
be.
to be,
There will be.
I will take the time to quickly read this. Is one of your authorized schools seeking approval to operate in a neighboring district's boundaries? Are you thinking about developing your own dependent charter school? Are you faced with the decision whether to grant a charter denied by another district on appeal? Conflicts between charter authorizers can arise in multiple contexts. This table talk will help attendees identify charter-related conflict areas and avoid or minimize impact on other educational interests. Yeah, and I do think that might have been tailored to us, although it was not the whole.
Although what it does say, Larry, is that this is not an aberration, that there is conflict because of the way the law is constructed. It's pretty much setting up conflicts, and there have been a lot of conflicts long before us, and I'm sure there will be conflicts after us.
But I think this is one of the most important statewide in many, many years.
Oh, there's no
This
doubt.
goes back 40 years.
There's no doubt about that.
This goes back to when people, such as myself, had kids in private schools, and we were paid for the private schools, but paying our taxes, and we wanted vouchers. We never got our vouchers, but that's what gave birth to the charter school. Anyway, also, then another one I did was fulfilling charter authorizer obligations under the LCFF and LCAP. I did manage, I don't know if they would help everybody any, but to get a few of the handouts that they had extra for the rest of the board. So, let's see. Four down the way. 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody want to take one for Matt?
I'll put one on his file here.
Okay.
I guess Lucy will scoop it up.
And then this is a PowerPoint. I might be short, just in case, couple on the PowerPoint. And that was basically the thrust of it. I came back on Monday night. There was a few things the next morning, but I had to leave to catch a plane. And going down my plane on Friday, you remember the rain was so bad, it was delayed for hours. However, I went early and got on the plane that was delayed before mine. So I had a 30-minute turnaround. Thought I was doing well coming back because I kept calling and the plane was on time on Monday night leaving San Francisco. And I get to the airport, everything is still okay. We're boarding in 5 minutes. And all of a sudden the little screen up there says delayed. Well, the plane's sitting there, I'm looking at it. And then it says crew availability. They lost the crew. We had no crew. By the time they said, now you're going out, it was 2 hours and 20 minutes later. And then they, by the time we got off, wheels up, it was an hour after that.
You know what would have prevented all of that? A high-speed rail system. You wouldn't have had that problem. You could have jumped on that train and been home and no delays.
Well, you know,
I don't know why we're having such an issue with the train, Larry. You just fixed it.
well, let me tell you what happened when I landed. I've never done this before, Mark. I had to get to my hotel, and they wanted a fortune for taxis and shuttles from the airport that we hadn't prearranged. So I got on that BART. So I did have a high-speed train that I rode all the way in.
But you weren't on B.
But not the bullet, no.
Consent agenda. Do we have a move?
So moved.
Second.
Call question?
Aye.
10.0 board reorganization. Gentlemen, we can do this one at a time, or we can open up 10, 1, 2, and 3 and do nominations all at once. Does anybody have a preference?
No preference.
No preference.
Okay, let's try this and see if it works. We're going to open up 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3 for election of president, election of vice president, and election of clerk. We'll focus first on 10.1. Well, do we have a move?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay, all three agenda items are now open. We'll focus first on president. I'm going to, if you have nominations, please bring them forward. I will nominate Ed Porter for president. Are there any other nominations for president? Do we have a second for that nomination?
I'll second.
I have a nomination for 10.2. I'd like to nominate Marcus Lasso as vice president.
I'd like to nominate Mike Fox. For the position as well. So that maybe you can get out from underneath just doing secretary work. So we have myself and Mike Fox. Do we have a second motion for Mike Fox? Do we have a second motion for myself?
I'll second.
Okay, election of clerk. Mr. Lake, do you have any interest?
None. My writing has last 7 years, upside down, backwards, and sometimes I can't read my own writing 2 days later, so.
Okay, with that, I will nominate Mike Fox. Do you have a second?
Second.
As to the election of Mr. Porter as president, call the question.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Porter will be president moving forward. As to the election Election of Vice President. Board Member Costanzo called question.
Aye.
Aye. Election of Mike Fox as clerk called question.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm keeping notes here, in case you need help with notes. All right, so Mark was nominated by Ed, I seconded, and then I was nominated for clerk by whom?
Myself.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Seconded by Larry.
And seconded by Larry.
You're welcome. Actually, I should say thank you.
All right, got
You're
it.
doing such a hard, tedious job.
Oh, it's a tough one.
Okay. There's the gavel. It's all yours.
Authorized to sign orders. Dr. Brent Woodard, Dr. Steve Budraja, and Chief Financial Officer, our Chief Financial Officer, and then Megan Freeman, Director of Educational and Student Services. Do we have a move? A move. Thank you. For a second.
I'll second.
I got a quick question.
So do I.
So Larry,
It seems like we're expanding the authorized signatures on 10.4.
That's what we had last time.
We had 3 last time.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
is there any dollar limit on them, or?
No, what those are for a variety of, whether it be checks or deposits that we have, there's a, so yeah, there's, it's part of this certification by the county, and who can sign it.
Well, I understand, we have
Right.
processes in place so
Right.
that people sign checks.
But it isn't, you'll see it in the pay warrant, whether, say for example, we pay an electrician and there's a check that comes through. We require 2 signatures, whether it's generally Steve and myself, if I'm not there, then Steve and Megan. If Steve's not there, Megan and I, so I
And
require
both
2
signatures
signatures.
have to be on the list.
Yes, it has to be on the list, otherwise we can't actually pay
And
the warrant.
there's not a dollar limit, but there traditionally has to be.
Well, let's say for example,
I'm just trying to figure out if this is a departure from anything we've done.
no, this is exactly
Thank
what
you.
we've been doing before. This is an annual certification.
Thank you.
Okay.
Call the question.
Aye.
401. 11.0, Educational Student Services. 11.1.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is this something that we need to open, or?
Well, yes,
The first reading.
yeah, so what I'm gonna have is I have a presentation for you tonight. And that's what I jumped in and I saw it.
That's all right.
Hi, good evening. I'm excited as your HR director to be working and making sure we have uniform hiring policy, making sure that when we're looking at our hiring policy, we're EOC compliant, which means we're an equal opportunity employer, and looking at some of our hiring packets and updating them. So what I wanted you to do, this has been vetted through both of our CSEA and our AATA organizations, as well as our legal. So this is an opportunity for you to review this process. We've tested it a few times with some of the new hires, kind of tweaked it here and there. I think it's a great way to support our mission and our goal of position control and ensure that we are following all the steps needed in order to hire appropriately for the positions in the district. So I would encourage you to read it and give us any advice, and we'll come back to you then in January for a final vote.
What you just described, which is 12.4.
Which is 12.4 was our hiring
When
handbook.
I was looking through all.
That's my fault.
Now you're gonna hear 11.1.
When I was looking through all the material, that was the forms on interviewing.
Yes, those are all the processes in which we use to interview our
So,
certificated and classified employees.
I looked at it, it looked comprehensive, it looks like something we do at Boeing, so you're in, I guess, good company, but anyway.
Well, let me tell you, to be quite honest with you, this district didn't happen. So thank you to
It was good to have
Freeman and Lucy, working on that very diligently. We were talking about, it's a legal protocol, it's all the compliance issues, making sure that, we have it done correctly. It's by the book, everything's, so this is the first read. It's a meaty document. We didn't want to expect you to approve it the first time, but we do want to enact it. And we already have a, if you will, a test in terms of the protocols They're working very well. It's a great opportunity to curtail position control. We have a whole process that we do through cabinet now, and we look at every position and how it impacts the budget, FTE, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be signed in triplicate. Her, him, Steve, and myself, we all sit around and argue about it. And then obviously we make sure it's within budget, whatever it is, and if it isn't, we find what we cut and how we bring it back to you. It's a very, very distinct process, all circulating around that document that she described, so it's very extensive.
This is the process you use so that you arrive at the correct candidate, but nonetheless, those we still approve opening the positions here as we have been, and then
Yes.
the actual hire.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you'll approve the, say if we're gonna do a new position, you'll approve the job description. Then you'll approve who we hired. And sometimes we ratify it, as you know, because I gotta get them in board, whatever, you know that's the case. But before they ever get there, before they ever go on the agenda, they're on the cabinet agenda, which is Megan, Steve, and myself, and then Lucy keeps our notes. And what we do is we go through it, we pour over it as it relates to the budget. If it's an open position, is it in the budget? Is it not in the budget? If Steve doesn't sign it, I don't sign it. She has to make the case. Steve has to make the case. If he wants additional people, whatever that may be in each division. So we've instituted a very strict protocol in position control that's helped us make sure that we maintain within our budget. This is a process that's part of that, but obviously it's much more comprehensive than what I just described.
It's pretty extensive, and so far it's been really great in terms of making sure that our principals are truly doing background checks on our employees, making sure that we're all in compliance and getting the best of the best out there. So I'm very excited to have these controls in place, and I'm sorry I jumped ahead. So we'll get back to the agenda items that we're supposed to be doing. I'm really excited to bring up Wendy Barnes. She's been working really hard at the high school with work experience. This is an annual event that we need to make sure we update and that we bring forward to you for our first read. It's an extensive document that she worked really hard on, so I'd like for her to present that to you.
Good evening, everybody. So that package you have in your booklets is for work experience education. It's been a course that we've had at Vasquez High for as many years as I can remember. The major purpose is to provide valuable work experience education for students who work part-time, and also give them the ability to earn credits. Students have to work a minimum of 100 hours to earn 5 credits. And they're given various assignments, journaling, submitting weekly timesheets, submitting pay stubs, and so on. This is an irregular class that meets on a daily basis. Instructional or guidance sessions are held throughout the semester at the equivalence of approximately 1 class period per week. We had to file with the CDE, so I contacted the Education Programs Assistance for the Career and College Transition Division of CDE, and he gave me the information and the template that we needed to file. And so basically what you're seeing in your books there are everything that we need to file. It includes a course description with the syllabus or units of instruction, declaration of possible credits have to be listed there that can be earned for each semester, formal written training agreements between the student, the teacher, the parents, and the employer. Also, we need to provide a letter of authorization to issue work permits. That's in there too. You're only seeing a draft. I think that Lucy has the one we need to send in, which has our letterhead and the 3 people that can issue work permits at our school, which would be Terry Combus and Yolanda McCauley and Ty Devoe. And so the materials have been updated and were produced, and we have to also show the board approval minutes for that. And we just, when that's all done, if you looked at it, it's been signed, and Dr. Woodard signed the authorization for the work permits, we can send that in and we'll be in compliance.
Once again, this is a demonstration of organization which we have at high school, and we appreciate your efforts in doing that. It's done by the book, and we finally honestly have it where it's appropriate in terms of organizational structure. So thank you, Wendy, for doing that. I know Mike has a question.
So Sorry.
It's okay.
Trying to understand the context of it. So when I was a kid, right, I got a job in high school, I filled out a form that was this big, brought it in to my counselor, and that was the end of it. Is this, I mean, it was a fairly...
This is probably the same idea, only it's gotten a little
the
more...
modern version of it?
Yeah.
Or is this, so what I'm getting at is, it was very comprehensive. I mean, kids will, it'll be a little bit of a burden for them because they're going to have to make a resume, but
Right.
clearly they're going to learn something educational out of their work experience rather than just have a job.
Rather than just going, yeah,
And making money.
and
So,
getting credit for it. They do have to do some
Now,
things to
is
help it be a
all
better
this-
learning experience.
what, is all this required because they want credit, or is this just what's required for a kid under 18 to work?
It's required if they want credit. They just need a work permit if they're under 18 to work, and that's part of this, part of all of this, but this is so that they can receive credit.
Okay.
So,
So
and
is there basically two tracks then, and just the standard work permit for those that don't want credit, and then the...
That's correct.
Okay,
Right,
now I understand. That's...
right, and they wouldn't get credit for it. They have to do this in order to receive credit for it. So it's usually,
So
you
it's
know,
almost like an elective, kind of?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Is this similar to something that many years ago, I may be showing my age, something called the 4-4 program? Have you ever heard of that? It meant
I
4
think I'm
hours.
too young to know about that.
Probably 4 hours of schooling and 4 hours of work, and it was called the 4-4.
Oh.
I mean, that was a Civil War program.
So, yeah, basically,
Well, my class was graduating of 1960, and it was alive and well, the 4-4 program then.
So I guess for me, just to close off my question and my comment, is so there's all kinds of electives. Some electives, kids get a lot of academically, let's say a foreign language or something. Some electives are a little softer, more fun. And you know, if a student is wants to work, for me, I think this is a terrific opportunity for one of those softer electives because the way you've structured it, I mean, it is fairly rigorous in learning how to write resumes, how to interview, how to do taxes. There's something about tax filings in there. And so from that regard, even as a softer elective, it does teach some very important life skills.
right, even if you'll notice in the agreement, it says the student agrees to be on time to work, and so it helps establish their, you know, the employer recognizing that there's expectations and that he should be getting educated, he or she should be getting educated.
Well, then our staff visits the school, the workplace. They go out and visit the
In
workplace.
these instances where a student wants credit.
Yeah. Yes.
2 points. One is a point of context. We've had a WE program at the high school historically.
We have.
So this is,
just more organized and well done by the book.
okay,
It honestly was not done
Okay, fair
to this degree until Wendy kind of.
We actually weren't on file with the state, or I think we're supposed to do that every 3 years, and it hasn't been done.
okay.
We became aware of that, and so we just tried to get it updated, and
Wendy, you may find it very interesting that when I was on the 4-4 program in 1960, it involved the food program.
oh.
In other words, a very famous steakhouse called Sutter's Mill
Oh, yeah.
was where my first actual job, not counting paper routes.
So how does it work with a student on work experience? They find their own transportation to and from the work site. They're at the work site. So what kind of liability do you face, either in transit to or from, and while they're at the workplace, if they were to suffer a workplace injury? So that's 2 questions. What kind of liability attaches as they're traveling to and from?
Now, I'd have to kind of honestly ask Keaton, but it's not, the actual job is not directly associated with the school class.
Well, but at the
It
moment,
is, I know.
somebody visits their workplace and the moment they're getting credit,
Yes,
then
I know.
there's a direct link
Sure.
between the district and the employer, something that we inherently have to accept off the program. So that's where I'm going with it.
I'll find out. Thank you.
Otherwise, certainly anything that better defines the program and has us better meeting head code requirements is certainly a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to 12.0, personnel services. 12.1, resignation, release of classified employees. Employee numbers 141552 and 553. Do I have a move? Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Call the question? Aye.
Aye.
12.2, approval of classified personnel. It's recommended the board approve the following certificate personnel. Employee number 141554, 563, 561, and 562. Do I have a move? Second?
You have a question.
Budgeted? Sorry.
What's that?
So are they all budgeted?
Of course. Okay. We approved the job description for our food service operation not too long ago.
That's correct.
What are these?
I believe that's
the last one on there, the food service.
Yeah, 1415.
Is
Yeah.
employee 562 the person
That's
filling
correct.
that position?
Yes.
And they were an existing employee here? Is that-
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All righty.
I'll have a question. Is everybody happy with the position of the baseball varsity head coach? Or
We're not there yet.
Oh, I thought that
We're on
was.
12.
We're on 12-2. 12-2, that's 12-3. Okay.
12-3.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
in regard to 12.2, call the question, please.
Aye.
401. 12.3 now, approval of coaching personnel. It's recommended that the board approve the following coaching personnel. 141555, 500, 556, 557, 558, 559, and 560. Do I have a move? Second? Thank you.
Now, same question. There, I guess it's for Ty.
What exactly would you like to know?
Just as, did the battle go away? Whatever the battle was about,
Well, the process, I believe so. I can answer that question. The answer is yes, it is. We believe we found the right guy, and we believe he's gonna do a good job if you so approve. And I think that those concerned parents issues won't be associated. Very good.
Is that all the discussion? Call the question on 12.3. Aye.
Aye.
401. Moving on to 12.4, we've already been through. And moving on to 13.0. 13.1. Professional services contract, Earth Systems, SC, on-call grading observation. So this is all associated with the high school construction.
Phase 2.
Phase 2, okay. It's recommended that the board approve the professional services contracts, Earth Systems SC, on-call grading observation, compaction testing, materials testing, and special inspections, phase 2. Do I have a move, please?
Move. Second.
So Larry and Mike, Mark, I'm sorry, yeah. And any
If I
discussion?
can just give you a little bit about this. This is a continuance, if you will, of phase 1. Same company that we did with phase 1 is now transferring over to phase 2. They're doing all of which is Earth Systems. Bruce Hick is involved with that, and so this particular contract just extends. It's a separate contract, but it will be the same vendor that was under phase 1 will now be phase 2.
What's the value of this one? I'm trying to remember.
145.6.
Is this one, I can't remember because I forgot my email there. I sent you.
You want me to-
Well, is this the one that was exceeding the allowance in our allowance budget?
Let me pull it up for you.
Yeah, I'm pulling it.
So I'm just going to, share with you my paradigm. I understand that, they charge by the hour and there's certain rates, and the allowance budget was is always somewhat notional at the get-go.
Right.
I guess where I would tend to fall is if something, even if it's an hourly rate scenario, if it exceeds the allowance budget, that we only issue the contract, for the time being at least, at the allowance budget. And then, because the way I figure it is, when somebody's deciding whether to charge 2.4 hours or 2.6 hours, when they know they're heading up against their contract value, you can't help but maybe get a better end turnout than if the contract value is higher. So for me, I would suggest if even if the bid, because it's an estimate, the guy says it's going to take me so many hours at this many dollars per hour. If it exceeds what we've got set aside for it in the allowance, that we only issue it to that point, and then we can always go back and revisit it, but at least it hopefully sets an expectation so that it doesn't encroach on our
You're right.
margin. So is there any reason not to do that?
Well, by my recollection, you had asked, and this particular one was on Earth Systems, and that's what you're talking about, obviously. And the budget currently is $150,000 for
Okay, so
special
that one's
effects.
easy. It was one of the other ones.
Okay.
So this
particular
comment
one
doesn't apply to this one. I'll just
Exactly.
ask the question again.
Yeah, when we get to the next one, then I'll...
Okay, that's fair. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Okay, in regard to 13.1, all in favor? Aye. It's the Inspector of Record Phase 2. Do I have a move?
Move.
Thank you. Second? Discussion?
I don't know if you want to ask your question
Is
again.
this the one
as it relates
that's
to-
over the
Yeah.
allowance?
Yeah, there's some in there. So basically, you were asking about the allowance budget for the consultant in this case.
For this particular function?
That's correct. And if you had also asked about the DSA inspector is 125, and the agreement said 145.
Right, that's the one.
Okay. So basically, we anticipated 10 months, okay? Phase 2 for this IOR at that time, and what I talked about is it could be 12 months. It's really hard to say,
I understand
depending upon the
everything.
punch list and the closeout.
I understand everything you're saying.
Okay.
This is almost and if I'm the only one that think there's a better way, then so be it. I would almost be inclined to suggest, let's let it for the 125. We don't have any encroachment yet on our overall allowance budget. Hopefully, the gentleman is working, knowing that there's really 125 there, and then not going over that estimate until we have to. Because you can only work to your benefit other than the administrative baggage associated with perhaps having to increase the contract value. Because I know, right, when I get a contract or I issue a contract, nobody likes to exceed the contract values.
I guess the issue for me would be is the 145.6 is that and not to exceed cost.
Okay, so the answer is that there definitely is some fluff in there. And meaning that when you do inspections, there's unanticipated events. They could run longer. You see, we talked about it's 10 months, we anticipate, could be 12, depending upon sequence of events that happens. So I can't guarantee that. And what I don't want to do is impact critical path by not inspecting in such a way. So we budgeted accordingly. And as you know, and Mark, what Mark and I talked about is what I'm going to bring to you. I think what you need is a comprehensive picture. Say, for example, whether I go through other inspection budgets and I'm way short, I may have $30,000 excess in that budget. I can now attribute to this particular
I'm
element
not
in TSA.
suggesting, by the way, by my question, that I'm worried about us going over budget at this point in time or anything.
Okay.
It's more of how do we want to operate? Do we want to operate by issuing contracts
Contract. Okay.
up to our allowance amount and not exceeding it unless we know we have to, rather than at the beginning issuing them higher than what we've got allocated for them and trying to keep track of that and hoping it comes in lower. And so the only downside I see to maybe the counter proposal I'm making is the administrative overhead associated if we would have to increase it later in the event that they need all 145.
Well, and that's really where, and I don't know that there's a cost associated with it, but what you have is either a contract revision or a change order that has to get approved before payment is made. So
We can't exceed contract value.
it's,
So we'd have to come back to you with some sort of change.
That's why I should say at 125.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying.
Because that's
The
what's
agreement,
allocated.
our anticipation is 145, only because, again, we anticipate there's 2 months of fluff that could happen.
I know.
So I hear what you're saying.
But I won't hold it up if I'm the only one here. It seems to be better practice to cap it at what we've got allocated for it, and then increase that cap later if it becomes necessary.
for me, it becomes situational. I think if we were on a razor edge budget, then I would want to do exactly that. I wouldn't want to be adding anything more to the costs. And we would set it at what we had budgeted for because we were running on a razor's edge. To me, the issue is I don't know whether we run on a razor's edge for professional services or not, because in the staff report, the only thing that's addressed in terms of fiscal impact is where the funds are coming from. And what I want to know is all of these issues collectively, one goes over, one goes under. In the end, I mean, we're looking at several different elements here. If all of those elements in their aggregate are below the aggregate estimation, then I'm okay doing it with the way it's being proposed to us. And it's not clear because we don't have that. So
I'm saying I'll have a report for you. Right?
So we did discuss that as these come forward in the future, it will show, for instance, if there's an overage, well, do we have an underage amount that has been tallied that's trailing to determine cost? And by having that number, we would know moving forward how we want to improve and do these things. So if we add these things up and it turns out that we're actually over budget, I would say, yeah, we need to do what Mike is saying. If it's a situation where we still have capacity in the budget after we add these up based on what our estimation was, then I don't have a problem doing it the way it's presented. So the question is where are we with it? What is the aggregate?
Okay. Keep in mind when I said 125, as we talked about, that was an anticipated cost. Obviously, there's budget came in, and as their presentation to us, it was 145.6.
It was anticipated at 10 months, right?
Yeah,
Not
you're
12.
correct. You're correct. So
And
that's
now
why
this
it
is
was
12
an overage. It could be. It could be 125.
So it's really the same almost.
So to answer Mark's question, the answer is that we are under budget, and in fact, significantly in some areas.
Well,
In special inspections.
that's, okay, let's narrow the focus
Okay,
to
so that's what I want to do.
special.
However, what I'm going to do is put together a more, whether it's quarterly or monthly or however you guys want to see it, a line item where we are in terms of what we anticipated in terms of costs, and whether we're over or under and how much with some more detail for you. And I realize the staff report just basically says here's where the money is, and yes, we have the money. But you don't know whether or not it's within budget of what we anticipate. Some things, and to be quite honest with you, we padded for this purpose.
I understand.
Okay.
We're solving slightly different problems here. So I understand entirely that it would be nice to know how we're doing in total. I also understand that they charge what they charge. My raising the question, would it be advisable to only issue the contract up to the value that we allocated, is only in that does tend sometimes to have a happy outcome of encouraging good people. Because the guy says, I've got $125,000 to do this job. They've been pretty good to me. 6.4 hours instead of 6.5. Because he's measuring against the residual on his thing. And so, to me, it was like, hey, here's an opportunity maybe to get a happier outcome. And say, okay, 145 for this job, and make sure I finish at 145, which leaves us having to find 20,000 someplace else. So it was only in an effort to get the best performance at the added cost of maybe having to increase the value later that I was making the suggestion. Let's just issue these not to exceed, they're by the hour anyway, not to exceed what we have allocated. That was my suggestion.
And I think it's a double-edged sword, because then the issue becomes, will the contracted party agree to sign a contract?
Exactly. It's by the hour.
Well, it's by the hour, but it's a set, it's a regimented cost in terms of what they do.
I didn't read it that way, but that's okay.
But I think to do it your way, Mike, we would have to be going back to a 10-month situation.
It's okay.
That may or may not happen in 10 months.
Well, I just think there's room for what Mike is saying. I think in terms of a general practice, I think it's a good practice to let a contract for what we budgeted for, as long as we can get the contracting party to sign the agreement. Okay. But the difference that I see in this case is they didn't come in at 145.6 for 10 months when we budgeted 120 for 10 months. If that were the case, I'd be saying, we're going to go find another party to meet our budgeted amount, or you can sign it for what we have budgeted. It's not that. This is in the event that we need 2 extra months, so it's not whether they're gouging or trying to add hours to the project. It's whether or not the project is going to dictate 2 extra months worth of inspection.
Maybe I misread it. So is it, because you're much more familiar with it, are they charging by the hour up to a maximum value of the contract?
That's correct.
Not, we guarantee you that we'll get the job done
No.
in this number of hours.
No.
So, of course, no matter what value we put it at, because you're paying somebody time and materials effectively, it can go over.
It could.
Of course, and I recognize that. So, but I'm trying, the only reason that would, and it's just an idea, I think that it gives a higher probability of a better outcome.
You want a different mindset going into the
Of
market.
course I do. This is how much money there is. Because no matter what, you're right, it's by the hour, it's not half.
So here's the
So
process.
it's not a double-edged sword.
I hear what you're saying. Let me just tell you the process. We went through a process, and we solicited an RFP through multiple different ASA inspectors. Okay? Obviously, this is already our previous inspector.
I'm sure they're doing a
So
great job.
as a result, obviously, but they were also the most cost effective in terms of what their delivery method was and what they, in terms of the proposal they submitted. So by the hour, they were more, so even if I wanted to go that back, and like I said, if I can convince them that, to take the 125, let's say they chose to do that, at some point they may bump up against that, it's okay, we're done. That would be my
And we increase it. Just like if they bump up against 145, it's okay.
Okay.
Don't worry.
I think your point is clearly noted.
Okay.
All in favor of 13.2?
Just one more question. When it's all said and done, when you add these in their aggregate, the contract amounts as depicted in the proposals are less than what we had estimated our budget.
You're talking in the aggregate, you're talking about all, when I look at all the line items that,
Well, at least 13.2, 3, and 4.
the answer is yes. In those special inspections, the aggregate value.
Because I'd be more inclined to invoke another strategy if that were not the case. But if that is the case, then
remember I did mention that
2,
we
3, and 4 do
At
some
least,
less.
we have afforded an opportunity. We've padded each of those.
2, 3, and 4, the ones under
That's
consideration today.
So
When
you add
sum
those
the
back.
contract value.
Exactly.
And you sum the allocation.
Exactly.
All on the spreadsheet in front of me. At least amongst that subset of 3 and 3, it's less.
Yes.
Meaning the contract value.
Yes.
The aggregate value, what you talked about. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, call the question on 13.2. Aye. Moving on to 13.3, professional services contract BSA in-plant inspector of record. I think it's Brandon Leach, right?
That's correct.
Well, I'll move this. Since I did all that.
Warrington?
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fox and Mr. Gasso. Any discussion on 13.3?
Well, let me give you a little on this, just so you'll hear. Total budget for the implants, $25K. So we have some flex in there. So this is one of those areas we have some flexibility in that because we doubt there's going to be additional costs there, all phase 2. So this is one of those points that Mike and I were kind of talking about was that we do have a little bit of pad in some of these to account for any overage in other plant inspections. So, but that's the only point on this on the implant, which is the same requirement as phase 1 is required in phase 2. But remember, we're only looking at 4 classrooms. Okay, so that's why it's much less.
Any further discussion on 13.3? Call the question? Aye. 13.4, professional service contract, PSA, implant welding. Do I have a move?
I'll move it. Second.
Any discussion? Call the question? Aye.
Aye. Do we have to hire an inspector when people go on break to check their orange juice? I mean, geez, we got more inspectors than we do laborers.
That's how it is. It's all PSA.
It's a requirement.
13.5.
I understand it's a requirement. That's what I'm being sarcastic about.
Actually, in all fairness, the day I went visit to the site, it was a beehive around there.
I'm sure. They were all inspectors.
They were building walls.
We're not doing actual work.
You know, next meeting, we're going to come up with second and tertiary inspectors to oversee the inspectors.
To inspect the inspector.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds like internal affairs, right?
I fully admit.
Don't we call those superintendents?
I fully admit this.
What are you trying to say? We have a move for 13.5.
What is 13?
Resolution 14-15-07, delegate the authority to certify administrative records prepared by the Acton Rose Unified School District.
I'll move.
Second, Larry?
Yeah.
Let me talk just briefly on this if I can and explain what this is. As you know, in the process of some of our litigation, there's an periodically, rarely, a requirement that we need to certify the record. That administrative record needs to be prepared and obviously signed by somebody. And typically, it's the clerk. Okay, so you were just approved as the clerk again. So it will be mine. Now, the only reason why I felt that it was necessary to add me on there, and I'd like to maybe recommend some amendments, and I think you may end up entertaining a motion from somebody here on the floor, but is that in the event that hypothetically you're incapacitated, you're out of town, you're on vacation, whatever, especially over the next 2 weeks was my main concern, is that obviously I'm dedicated to be here for the next 2 weeks and making sure that I'm available to make sure these things are signed. I need to make sure that there is a timing mechanism to these pieces that I'm concerned about. This isn't a blanket fiduciary duty that I'm looking for. This is still falls back on you, and I think there may be a recommended process for that, such as the requirement for me would be to make sure that I somehow get in touch with you as the clerk, that you have an opportunity to review what I'm signing. Obviously, And again, I don't know whether or not you're available, let's say in the next 2 weeks, but who knows, something happens. Then obviously I would then probably go to the president, have him certify that in this case, but obviously have a conversation. So it isn't just, okay, Britt's over here signing a bunch of administrative records, carte blanche. You know, so there may need to be some more language there that would allow me the opportunity to kind of do the process that I talked about. If you're available, then you will sign. You get first right of refusal. If you're not available, then they need to be signed, and you're in Washington or wherever you're at, then I have the authority to work with you to sign it.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for consideration. It would be a motion to add an addendum to the resolution that's pending. The purpose of the motion for the addendum is to make sure that the board doesn't abdicate its fiduciary responsibility to the district. So the motion would be this, that if the resolution is adopted and the authority is granted, that the authority is not standing authority for the superintendent to act in isolation, and that prior to his acting to certify any documents, that he must first reach out to whoever the secretary of the board is. And
This would be the clerk.
Okay.
the clerk, I'm sorry.
I'm the secretary.
I meant the clerk. Reach out to the clerk, and if given approval by the clerk, for the superintendent to sign in the stead of the clerk, that the superintendent can go ahead and therefore do so. And so therefore the amendment would also be that the board is giving the clerk the authority to move that responsibility to the superintendent if the clerk is not available.
Mark, what I'd like to do, I agree with your resolution exactly what it is. I do think that if the clerk is not available, it should go to the board. It should, then, the way he was suggesting, should come to the president or the vice president.
Yeah, you know, I don't know how the legalities on that work. The clerk, by statute, is given a certain amount of authority to sign. I don't know if, doesn't mean that they can't, I just don't.
What I was advocating is that if he's not available and I need to talk to somebody, obviously I won't do it in isolation. Say, God forbid, he's not available.
If he's not available,
Okay.
yeah.
Then I would come to the president, discuss it with you.
Yeah.
I would still have authority to sign it,
Sign it.
but you would have due knowledge of what I was signing and why I was signing it and why he was incapacitated for whatever reason.
I will second Mark's motion.
Yeah, but ultimately, Mark's right, you couldn't sign it.
Yeah.
Only the clerk, and now if you would grant me the authority, I can sign it.
So basically, the motion would be is that before signing in the stead of the clerk, the superintendent would reach out to the clerk. If the clerk was not available, the clerk would give the authority to the superintendent to sign it on his behalf, his or her behalf. In the event that the clerk is not available, the superintendent would reach out to whoever the board president is and advise the board president that he is signing in the clerk's stead. That's the motion.
I second
You
it.
seconded the motion. Okay, so what we should do is call the question whether the motion is accepted or not.
So is Mark's question, is Mark's motion in regard to 13.5, we're going to call the question on that. It was made by Mark, seconded by me. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye. That's
From there, now
unanimous.
we can vote on
Now we can vote on 13.5 with the inclusion of this resolution just made by Mr. Estasso. All in favor of 13.5? Aye.
Aye.
Resolution 14-1507, PINCO, voting member designee. It is recommended that the board approve resolution 14-1507, appointing Mrs. Paulette Bushner, the voting member, and Mrs. Connie Sanderson as the alternate for the Partners in Nutrition Cooperative. So this is basically giving Paulette the right to sign.
Well, she's a voting member of PINCO, which is a service supplier. And so then she would obviously, there's a process and that she would go through in order to go, and she, in this case, would be a voting member designee.
What's the voting? What do they vote on?
They vote on different allocations of food sources and where they're going to get their supplies, and there's a whole process in terms of food substance that they adopt. She's a representative for the district for Pico, which is a large conglomerate that services multiple districts, hundreds, huge organization.
No financial authority.
So there's a lot of members, and she would just be our representative.
Do I have a move for 13.6?
I'll move.
Second. Call the question. Aye.
Aye.
13.7, we have a review of the first interim financial report by Dr. Devoe.
First interim report, which is as you folks know, these are snapshots of our budget within a period of time. In this case, this represents data, actuals data through October 31st, 2014. It includes any new information that we did not have during September when we did the revised budget. So we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. On our enrollment, and we obviously didn't have this number back in September. So as you can see, our enrollment continues to decline. As it has over the last several years. We've gone from 1301 now down to 1083. We lost approximately 108.88 to district-sponsored charter schools and an additional 110.88 to just natural declining enrollment. So obviously that can present somewhat of a problem for planning purposes and for our budget.
What was the number we assumed?
We assumed that we would lose 140 students to the district-sponsored charter. We actually ended up losing less, so that kind of worked out in our favor, and I'll share that with you.
I thought you said we lost 188 to the partnership, okay, and 110 to the declining enrollment, the trend.
Right.
But we were expecting to have lost 140 to the cap, in addition to the natural attrition.
Right, but we lost 188, so we lost more than 5.
We lost 108.
Well, thank you.
That's why I was going to say, I didn't hear that number.
Thank you.
And the reason that that's important is because natural declining enrollments, obviously, there's a hold harmless provision. However, when there is a loss due to a district-sponsored charter, it's an immediate loss of ADA, and so it obviously reflects our revenues more dramatically. So
the real quick, just because we're on this topic, so the immediate loss due to the charter was less than we thought. Was the 110, how'd that compare with the natural enrollment decline?
Projection.
we had declined about 70 last time around, so when you compare like P2 numbers, we went from 1277 down to about 12.
In September, in the assumptions for the year.
He wants to talk about what did you project in terms of what you budget for in terms of reduction of loss of ADA versus actuals.
I believe the projection was about going down to a funded, I have to go back, probably about 1140. It was relatively close. We assumed that we actually assumed that we would lose less on the natural because previously we had lost 70 kids. So we assumed that we'd lose about, a certain number of kids on the natural, less than what we had anticipated. But we assumed that we would lose more on the district-sponsored charter. So it evened out a little bit in that respect.
Okay, because I would seem that's the important.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Just trying to figure out where we landed versus where we thought we would land.
And I don't want to keep interrupting, so we should allow you to, sorry, to chat, but I'm going to interrupt you. The enrollment history, in order to maintain the credibility of this chart, I think we need to put an asterisk or a caveat that reflects that decrease from 1301 to 1083, that 108 was because of the transfer to a charter school.
You're right.
Because I want to be able to look at this chart as basically a natural cohort reduction that has to do with family migration, population, birth rates, and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Versus, the fact that we
piece of the pie or, marked up
Yes.
in the bar.
Sure.
That blue or whatever else is custom. Yeah.
Identify that,
Yeah.
sure.
So
In
we
the
could just-
future, when we use this, we'll add that piece.
So that way, if we were just looking at it from a pure natural cohort trend, we could add the 108 back in there
Right.
to at least get an idea, so it didn't look like we just.
We'll adjust the chart.
Okay, all right.
Just for the record, I would also go into the charter, save us about $500,000 a year. So that's in a way a good thing, it's not loss where we.
I look at it this way too. I think the best thing about it is we responded to the community's need. They wanted it, and we responded academically to what they were requesting. Good turnout, good amount of kids went there, but we also provided the opportunity for those 32 kids to come here. And so we retained 32 more than we anticipated, but at the same time, we're providing an academic program to the community that they wanted and saving
It was a great
$500,000.
solution all around because we weren't going to be able to keep it open the way it was.
Correct.
Losing $500,000 a year.
That's correct.
So moving on to total revenues, and this is basically a comparison from our revised budget done during September to what we know now. Our largest source of funding, which is the LCFF, we're projecting to receive an additional $172,000 roughly than what we had anticipated back in September. And that has to do with two things. The first thing that we talked about before is losing 108 kids versus anticipating the loss of 140. So that would have been an immediate loss of ADA, so we were able to get a positive out of that because we projected that we would lose more. In addition to that, we increased our unduplicated pupil count. Now, keep in mind that the LCFF, there's factors in that formula that provide for additional funding if students fall under one of three categories, that being English language learners, students that are on free and reduced price lunch, and those that are in foster care. So the numbers for students that fall in those categories actually went up from 38 to 45%. So that helped our LCFF, and we were able to realize some additional dollars that we'd not anticipated back in September. On the federal revenue side, we're up a little bit. We got some money from Title III. We got a few extra dollars for some programs that we hadn't qualified for before, so it's about $7,000 roughly. On the other state revenues, you can see an increase of about $10,000 from what we had originally anticipated, and what that is the projection for lottery went up, so the amount per kid on the lottery went up a little bit, more than what we had planned for. So that was obviously a good thing. We got a little bit of extra money on the other local revenue, on the other state revenue side. And now finally on the other local revenues, we've got some more, a little more concrete information in terms of our agreements with partnerships and other charter schools that we're working with. And so this increase of $358,000 approximately is based on our existing MOUs, our existing facilities leases, and based on the projected counts that we've been given by our partnership charter schools. So all in all, we're looking at increased revenues of about $546,000, getting $546,000 more than we had anticipated back in September. Now moving on to the expenditure side. Yeah, definitely it is good news. We've got some projected increases in certificated salaries. We had made a few additions since September, and so that's reflected there in the $148,000 increase. Classified, I'm sorry, question?
I do have a question on that as well. More than we thought in September, 148,000 worth is more than the added 38 students that we were able to obtain. Right, that would be 2 teachers worth. Maybe this is far more, so.
Right. Now keep in mind the way they do funding growth usually. So this is a P1 snapshot. We don't get funded until P2, which will be May. So it's always in arrears as well. So we're getting funded off last year's P2 for this year's, and then as we get to P2 year, then we get funded again for the following year. So it's always in arrears.
Right, but the funding is in arrears, I understand that. The expenditures are.
No, But it's actually a good thing if we're declining enrollment.
I understand, but I guess all I'm trying to say is, so I would expect to have more expenditures for staff if we retain more students, i.e. lost to partnership, because they have to go sit in the schoolroom in a classroom. Where kids to a teacher, that's 2 more teachers.
Right.
We might need.
Right. Which is, you'll see on the expenditure side what we had to do. And there's some notations there. What you just said is exactly what happened.
Is that effectively what the $148,000 is?
148 where it says certificated salaries?
The difference.
Yes,
That's
primarily.
primarily to
Yeah, that's correct.
So as you can see, there's a slight increase to classified salaries, approximately $5,000, not a significant change. Employee benefits go up a little bit with the addition of the staff. Your books and supplies, we've got increased projected expenditures for that, as well as the services and other operating. And that's primarily due to the fact that we've been spending more money, we've been buying additional supplies, we've had some maintenance issues, we've been spending money on legal costs and other things. So there's been some additional spending, and we've budgeted some additional dollars for a PR effort in trying to kind of stabilize our enrollment. So we've had to include the increase in expenditures to account for that.
Let me elaborate just a bit. Again, this is a snapshot. Okay, we're going to get into some percentages of where we're at currently with the budget, where we're going to, So I asked Steve to increase, obviously, the budget, but I've also asked that each division curtail spending for the remainder of the year and try to make sure that, if you'll remember right, and I know our team can do it, we had talked about it previously last year, when we were able to take a look at those reduced expenditures as it related to what FICMAT thought we were going to be way over, we ended up way under. I anticipate we'll be able to reduce this significantly, but again, we can't, I guess I want to under-promise and over-deliver. This is the under-promise. This is worst-case scenario, what you're seeing here. And obviously, I don't like it. I'm not happy with it, okay, in terms of where we were at in the revised budget versus the interim. He knows that. Everybody back there at the table knows that. We'll be talking about ways that we can reduce expenditures. Can't just go out wildly spending just because we have some additional revenue that comes in. I don't want 500 to come in and 500 to go out. We need to make sure that we have some controls. You see some of the things we've done in terms of position control, some of the other controls that we're putting in, whether it be, but also we want to make sure that we're not impacting the program. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do stuff like that. I can assure you that. We just are, as a team, going to be looking at ways that we can reduce these expenditures and come back in closer to what the revised budget was. This is, again, worst case scenario. The PR effort, if you will, you see at the bottom. At one time, we had an individual that was heading that up, and I felt was very effective at taking a look at this district as a whole and retooling it, trying to make sure that we find a way to advertise and to celebrate some of the successes that we've had. You see some of the APs, some of the other stuff. It's just not there. Not to mention, I think, obviously, our reputation as a district has been somewhat damaged, unjustifiably, as it may be, it has. And I think it's time, as soon as we get this lawsuit settlement, that I need to, again, make sure that our word gets out, that our voice is heard, and that we have an opportunity to refute some of the assertions that are out there. And I think they're pretty broad, and I think at this point, I'd like, again, I've included it in this budget. I'll be bringing to you a possible proposal, but I wanted to bring it to your attention before we ever got there. And it would be probably around $2,000 a month is what I asked Steve to put in there for a PR effort for the remainder of this year. That's something I think is a critical need. Our voice needs to be heard as a district of what happened and why it happened and why we did what we did. There's a lot of misconceptions about what happened. There's a lot of things that people think, and it's just erroneous nonsense, to be honest with you. They need to see the facts, and we have an opportunity to do that. We're going to have a detailed, explicit response to the FICMAT report, but we're also waiting again until we can kind of finish some of the processes, if you will, as going through the litigation. At the end of that, again, I think it's important that we get our voice heard. This budget allows us to do that if, again, you approve a concept piece that I'm going to bring forward to you in January. So that's all I have on the expenditures. Are there any questions on that?
Go fast. What was the primary driver behind the books and supplies?
Primarily, it's been spending down some restricted dollars that we need to spend, like Common Core, for example. That money is to be used up by the end of 14-15, by June 30th.
But we knew about that in September, right?
We did, but we also, we've had a little bit of pent-up demand to be, from 13-14 to 14-15, we really did put a kind of a freeze on certain things in terms of spending. So we've had a little bit more spending at the sites in terms of books, in terms of maintenance, you know, in terms of things that we need.
So it's not necessarily having to spend the title, the special color money thing.
Not all necessarily due to that.
It may be because we did clamp down at the end of last year, and people are coming to us with real needs.
Right.
And on the revenue side, it looks like we can do it.
We had a really tight budget last year, if you remember.
Okay, so I get that one. What was the major one in the 216?
Really, that has a lot to do with increases for contracted services, which includes legal fees, oversight, things like that.
I mean, I know when we went through the budgets before, we staked out pretty healthy legal fees.
Correct.
And you're suggesting you want to stake out even healthier values.
Saying based on what
Is that
we
because of
currently
the
see,
rate at which
answer is
stuff's
yes.
coming in?
I'm sorry?
Is that because of the rate at which the
That's
fees are
correct.
coming in?
It's not just with charge school development, it's with some of the others as they were coming in from previous bills. So that's through 3Fs, and obviously through the construction piece, this is not associated. All the construction legal is going to be
Different
pot.
pot, but,
Yeah.
but the healthy amount we thought we set aside in December, we're augmenting,
That's correct.
and the rationale for augmenting them is the rate at which the actuals are coming in.
And again, I believe this is worst case scenario, and the answer is yes. But I think they're going to stop, if you will. We think that we're going to be well under that budget, but again, under promise.
Thanks.
So the bottom line is the revenues, obviously, projections have increased, and so have the projections for expenditures. So moving on to see the sort of the analysis here, we've sort of, we're right on track in terms of where we are with our expenditures for certificated and classified salaries, benefits. We obviously were locked and loaded to start the school year, so we spent a larger chunk of money on books and supplies, and then the services and other operating, we're sort of right on target in terms of what we've budgeted and what we spent, what we've got left over. So I'm not overly concerned about anything in this area. Moving on to the next.
Mike has a question.
So the salaries should reflect basically the ratio at which we're through the year?
Correct.
Okay. And so that you would expect to line up nicely.
Right.
All right.
Don't have
Employee benefits, maybe they lag, and that's why.
Yeah, the question I have is, why are the employee benefits unreflective of our point in time in the budget?
Part of it has to do with the nature of some of those expenditures. Like, for example, if you pay for a retirement, like for example, we did the PARS program. Well, that's a one-time payment, and let's just say that that's $100,000 or $150,000 that we owe to PARS for the early retirement incentive. Well, that hasn't been paid yet. So when that becomes due, then all of a sudden that 27.6 number goes higher. So we have to keep in mind.
Remember, in this district too, the contract, we pay for retirement for certain employees for the remainder, for the extended amount of time. So those payments may not have come in as well.
Yeah, well, I think what
Not just
what I
part.
heard you say is there is a lag.
There is a
the
lag.
benefit payments versus calendar lag.
Right, exactly.
Okay. And then the books and supplies is natural. You do all that at the beginning of the year.
Our deficit for the current year, which is very, very close to a balanced budget. Our ending fund balance is healthy at over $500,000. We've got the 3% reserve requirement. In fact, we have in excess of that. We're projecting 4.76% at the current time. So we've reduced the deficit, our projected reserve is higher, so all in all, things look pretty good. Moving on to multi-year projections, again, this is just kind of forecasting based on what we've seen. We had to project increased declines in ADA based on the trend, but obviously that could change. These are just projections, and so we're anticipating some reductions. We've included some potential reductions as in order to basically have a balanced budget and meet the 4% minimum requirement. As that does go up, when a district falls under 1,000, the reserve goes from 3 to 4%. So we have to be able to project a minimum reserve during the out years.
So, you guys remember when we talked about that, that is something that, obviously a major concern of mine. And one of the big things that I want to do with the DR effort is to try to stay above 1,000 students. Try to bring back kids with the high school. Try to bring back kids with the program. With things like, we celebrated tonight. They need to start seeing, and it may be just a demographic issue in terms of capacity in the community, but we also think there's quite a few kids that may be going to homeschool. Maybe going to independent study, maybe going to a variety of different programs, that if we can offer those and we can, entice them back, then obviously we can try to reduce or at least change that trend of reduction year after year after year. Can't imagine a school district with 500 kids in 2020. I don't know what I would do with that in terms of educational programming. What do you do with that? So, it's becoming more difficult as we get fewer and fewer kids.
So the bottom line, we are projecting a positive. We are self-certifying that we have a positive certification with the county, and anticipate that the county will concur with that. Moving on to the next slide.
Before you do, there's always one slide question. Go. It's not something right. I'm just curious, what structurally is going on where obviously in 16-17, the expenditure is coming down at a rate at which, the gap is only 12,000. What mechanism is in play in 15-16 such that the deficit, pops up? Why aren't the expenditures coming down as fast as the revenue in that particular year?
Well, it's really just basically, at this point, because they are multi-year projections, and we're assuming, to be have 958 ADA, and then another decline going down to 833 ADA. So we have, as indicated here, we have included a number of potential reductions to personnel, to benefits, to all sorts of other
what the chart would
categories.
suggest is, I'm just asking, there's a trend. What it would suggest is that the expenditures reductions aren't kicking in fast enough in 15-16, but they ultimately do in 17.
Right.
But this is, again, let me put it to you this way. Until was a snapshot, and he kind of has to put together some assumptions. Until we can have a budget study session and we can begin to elaborate on what those reductions are going to be, obviously we're going to bring to you as a board like we've done in the past, and I'll put a number up there. $117,000, guys, I need additional reductions that to the tune of, and then we're going to decide on what those are and how to then accommodate that, and obviously to create a balanced budget. So right now, that plan doesn't exist, so we're just reporting a deficit, but yet we still have a 4% reserve, so that we'll make sure that in the out years we're fine. But I think through our collaborative sessions in the budget study, we'll be able to reduce that deficit as we've done in years past.
So moving on, basically.
And if you don't have this, it's fine. I just want to get maybe an idea of our enrollment per site. I mean, as for...
It's funny, let me tell you that. There was this chart in here, but it was all goofy because of the different charter schools and stuff. So we'll get you an enrollment piece. I just took it out because it just didn't make sense.
Yeah, usually it's in there.
Yeah, just the way they're reporting it now at the state, as we pulled our state report, honestly, it's way off. There are some weird audits.
We were still showing Ogdenville's a school that's having students there, and we don't have, there is no Ogdenville.
We'll pull a report for you and give it to you.
that needs to be
There's
reconfigured
how many in each school?
Yes, we'll have that.
because it's skewing the numbers.
We'll give you, we have another report there, but I mean, you'll see, we'll give you a report for each of those schools.
So some considerations, obviously, the important thing is that we are demonstrating the ability to meet our reserve for the current year. We'll obviously be looking at, taking a look at compensation for staff in regards to the potential restoration of the furlough days that were taken last year. We want to continue to work with our charter schools and our partnerships and be able to provide effective oversight and be able to provide effective both fiscal and educational, which we've incorporated into the expenditures that you saw, and utilize deferred maintenance effectively to be able to identify needs as it relates to facilities and be able to take on some of those projects that need to be completed.
Well, I'd like to go a little step further. I'd like to advocate that we take a look at a deferred maintenance account that actually has money in it and we actually spend it. And because we looked at, through the Schools to Watch program, we were up at High Desert. Obviously, one of the considerations in the report was the fact that the school is really in need of repair and painting and this and that and you name it. Will does a great job and his team does a great job, but he needs money to be able to do and continue to do a great job. I think we need to go beyond that in terms of capital outlay as well as we're taking a look at some of the trucks they drive are just embarrassing. I don't know how he keeps them running, how he kind of manages that. They're from what, 1977 is one of I think our latest model truck we have. So they're in need of repair. So how long is too long? I'm saying we're past that, 10, 15 years ago. So we need to start thinking about in terms of laying out a plan, which I'd like to do in our budget study session, but again, I'm trying to lay the groundwork for you to consider that we need to, it can't just be, okay, well, that's great, we got an additional 4% reserve, we got additional funds. We need to kind of programmatically, like we did with AP and some of the other things, put it in deferred maintenance so we can maintain our facilities. And so again, keep that in the back of your mind when we get to the budget study session.
I think any additional monies should be earmarked partially for that.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some ratios, like you said. Academic is obviously at the top of the heap, but we can't forget, the school falling down around our ears, specifically at High Desert. This school's pretty good. It's a great school. Still needs maintenance. Still needs things. Vasquez is obviously going to be brand new, but I would also say that part of the consideration, if we don't allocate money to maintain it, it won't be very long. We spent a lot of money, a lot of time and effort to get it. I'd like to maintain it to the highest standard we possibly can.
I don't even know that it's underfunded anymore. It's not funded.
Exactly.
And even if we wanted to ignore our schools, we've got a municipal lease agreement that we have to pay on. And that goes red into the out years. So even if we were to spend every penny in that deferred maintenance account on the municipal lease agreement, it wouldn't be enough to cover the value of that agreement. So, and might I remind everybody, new and old on this board, that the reason we took such drastic steps to enter into this municipal lease agreement is because for years and years and years, we ignored our facilities. And we were unable, through a normal deferred maintenance process, to keep pace with just the HVAC issue. That alone was a mess, so we ended up having to incur debt on that in order to fix that problem. And we've got to be able to pay for it. And may I also add is be careful what you ask for, and we all want it, nobody less than me, is a brand new high school. So when we start talking about budget considerations, the first thing we need to do is we're going to have to slap more money into our routine maintenance account.
Yes.
Anybody that thinks we're going to run routine maintenance historically for the brand new high school needs to reconsider what they're thinking. And 4 to 5 years out, that routine maintenance cost and that high school is going to equate to a higher deferred maintenance cost, because at some point, as that school begins to age, we're going to have to put deferred maintenance into it.
That's absolutely correct.
And if we don't program this now, we're never going to. some future board is going to be stuck in the same situation that we've been trying to pull ourselves out of for years here, is to make sure that we have this going in a very programmatic way. And we're never going to replace a vehicle. Ever, never. Mark my words, we will never replace a 1932 Edsel that we're driving around town unless we have a deferred maintenance account. At what school board, in what life, under current LCFF funding, is going to say, we need a new $40,000 truck? And here's a check. It's not going to happen unless we've developed a depreciation structure where we're putting a little bit of money into that account. And otherwise, it will never happen.
Depreciation.
And yet, we've never had a depreciation account. And, you know, I've been on the board for 9 years, and I'm as much to blame as anybody for it. Because, you know, I bring it up every year, and we don't do it every year. At some point, we got to say, darn it, we've got to create a depreciation account. Even if I have to pull $5 out of my own pocket and put it in the account as seed money and say, okay, here's $5 towards the $40,000 truck. Okay, at some point, we got to start doing that, or we're never going to replace a vehicle.
Agreed.
So, I mean, we've got some steps ahead of us, and let us not forget that we got to pay our teachers back.
That's number one on our list.
So we've got to get that done, and that deferred maintenance alone, all of a sudden, whatever funds we have, will start to dry up on it. So just, you know, we're going to have some discipline to do this. We didn't address anything about 1%, 3.5%.
Do you want to go through that now?
I think we have to.
Okay. I thought we had talked about it in the revenue. I thought we would do that. I can talk about that.
I mean, you know, Lakeland plays a big role in this.
Sure.
In terms of where we're at with this funding.
Okay, so what Mr. Stasso was talking about is in terms of charter school projections, in terms of what we're looking at in terms of revenue and anticipated costs. Now, what you're seeing in the revision, if you will, of the first interim is it reflects the 1%, which LACO allowed as per the letter that we received. If you remember it, it talked about that, you know, how much they were going to allow and how much they disallowed. Well, I wanted to make sure that, you know, part of the conversation was as well, okay, what are they going to allow now? And we are going in accordance with what LACO has suggested, which is, again, the 1%. You'll see the fees for facilities, and I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me pump it up a little bit.
You don't need it too extensive to use that, but I got the message, I think.
Okay.
Which is that we're booking only the 1%.
That's correct.
LACO says we should book.
But I think it helps us in many ways. We had talked about, I think it's foolish fiscally anyway, to take a look at that and be too optimistic about any kind of revenue that is coming in. Obviously, we don't know what these schools are going to produce in terms of numbers, and don't forget, we also, when we have revenue coming in, we have expenditures that need to be booked against that as well. Oversight is extensive in this district. We have a pretty broad program to be able to produce that oversight. However, we haven't booked against those revenues because, again, we're going to have the expenses at some point, but it's going to be in arrears. We won't know the actuals until we close the books for this year, and then we'll see what bubbles to the top, if you will, and how much carryover we have. So the anticipated value, the grand total we expect, is all inclusive, whether it be facilities at Agua Dulce, how much they're going to pay us, in terms of rent, if you will, or leasing of that facility, and then fees for special education services that Ms. Freeman set up in terms of that oversight. Whether it's Janet's salary and all the other oversight, obviously it's not included here. This is just a revenue base. We know it's in excess of what we're currently spending, but we also know there's a lot of due bills coming up as well in terms of oversight. We haven't booked against that yet because the revenues aren't there yet. They will be, but we don't know what they're going to be at the year, when we do our unaudited actuals, you'll have an extensive report that shows actuals in terms of numbers that you'll see in terms of carryover. At that point, then we'll be able to have a better conversation. But for right now, it's based on the 1%, which is required by LACO.
Is the Assurance Academy and the Hope Charter, those are based at the Acton School, is that right?
No, that would be Assurances there, and then we have Mosaica, and then, oh yes, you're correct.
They have a footprint there.
Yeah, but they do have, but, yeah. The actual kids are not there. They have some office space there. So they have some folks there. That's correct. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Yeah, it's just the Einstein, of course, is based at the two locations at the present time.
That's
275.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Okay, no problem.
Address that we're proceeding with the allowances that were provided to us by LACO and assisted with FICMA.
All right, move on to 13.8. Accept the first interim financial report for the 2014-2015 school year. It's recommended that the board approve the first interim report. Do I have a move? I'll second it. Okay, Mr. Muscasa. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
That was an aye there.
Aye.
Thank you. Future agenda items. Moving on to calendar. Our next meeting is January 8th, 2015, next year. Followed by January 22nd. No special board meetings in between there?
Not as of yet, no, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. And then the next meeting on the calendar, as it stands now, is February 12th, 2015, exactly. And 16.0, not applicable. We did not have closed session today. And so the same goes for 16.1. 17.0, adjournment. Do I have a move? I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned at 9:47 p.m.